Well, I'm going to read a few poems. I was going to try and read poems about, or that had something to do with Denver. I'll start off with this one, which does. It's at the Confluence. You come to the Confluence. You want to connect, feet in South Platte, under the bridge on a sand spit, beneath indigo sky. At home in your skin, you stand on a rock, river rushing by, crash and roar of rapids in your ears, your hands on your hips, you want to jump in, go with the flow, all the way to Oglala, break open your veins to know, ready for sacrifice and rebirth. Across the river, a large film crew is setting up a shot. Some onlookers have binoculars. That's my man, mi hombre, mira, in the maroon shirt, in front of the green umbrella. Turns out to be a new comedy with Eddie Murphy, who suddenly bounds up the long flight of steps and jumps into a black SUV as real as a reality show. Well, this has something to do with Denver. Brushstroke. Clifford Still's paintings are stills, frames caught from the whirling motion of things, falling in vertical cliffs of light, a trickle in the corner of the eye, like cool water, like a thin ribbon of blood. I'm going to read this. Forgive me if I read this at another Neal Cassady Birthday Bash. It's called Crazy Horse, and it's after reading Marie Sandos, and this is in honor of Standing Rock, the history behind still going on. The rhythm of war changed after '68. Until then, fighting against the whites was not so different from taking coup or stealing horses from the Crow. After '68, it dawned on Crazy Horse that the old ways were dead, that a new kind of war was being waged, where there was killing every day, all the time, and no point in displaying subtleties of art. Now it was a question of survival. The whites would come forever, digging up the earth, laying immortal roads, buying up souls to save them from falling into the pits they called hell, slaughtering the buffalo. There were no rituals for taking alcohol, no laws to protect against greed and lies, and nothing to save him from his sacred craziness. A chief too wild and true to be trusted, who never let his picture be taken for the files in Washington, or went to see the great white chief to be decorated with top hat and cane. He was not one for vaudeville. Even at home, he went to war without vermilion, only a stone behind his ear, a single feather in his loose hair. This is an old poem I found, but a light relief. An apology. Curled between ourselves in sleep last night, you were in my dreams, and I woke up scratching you like the squirrels gnawing at the ceiling from the attic. You kicked me, you said. Sorry, I said, but I didn't mean it, because in the dream you were really horrible, and I knew I was going back there. This is the same you, quite a few years later, called Ambien Heaven. This is 1999. How could you think I'd abandon you? I crawl across the bathroom floor, kneel at your feet as you sit in an Ambien haze. A 10 milligram dose makes you stumble around like you're drunk on some sweet fruit of the gods. I wouldn't dare leave you for a minute. You might hurt yourself. I cradle your knees, kiss the tip of your nose, take off my clothes to prove I'm coming with you to Ambien Heaven. And those were for my late husband, Ed Dorn. I'm actually going to read another one, too. Someone just who lives in Lakewood was writing about Ed Dorn and Amiri Baraka and sent me his essay. And at the end, he has some quotes. And I found this one. It's a poem of Ed Dorn's. I've always found much to recommend in the slogan, soak the rich, but I've never found much discussion regarding the uses of that marinade. I have one other modest proposal. Feed them to the poor. Let's see. This one is it's a prose piece. I don't know if I have time to read this. Well, I will. It's the death of Richard Browdigan, 1935-1984, who was a friend. I first heard of Richard Browdigan's death, although I didn't know it at the time, when the phone rang in the middle of the night. I picked it up. Oh, hi, Jen. It was my brother, John, the only person who calls me that. I'd got an old friend of yours here. He'd like to talk to you. John always keeps his cool, especially in difficult situations. It's Richard, he said. I'm passing him on to you right now. The long-distance call crackled and hummed. On the other end, a suppressed giggle, muffled and far away. Who is this? I asked, annoyed to be woken up. It's the middle of the night here. More heavy breathing, and then the voice let out a hoot and a howl. I just wanted to say hello and goodbye, he said, hardly able to contain his mirth. Bye-bye, I've got to go now. Here, listen to this. Followed by a loud gunshot and the sound of the receiver banging as it fell and dangled from its cord in a red telephone box in London. Jolted awake, I lay in bed trembling, trying to figure out who this Richard was who'd just killed himself. The only name I could come up with was Richard Wright, a guy we knew growing up who went on to play keyboards for Pink Floyd. He was hardly an old friend, but he was the only Richard I could come up with who might, by some weird stretch of the imagination, be in a London telephone booth with my brother John. A few days later, a friend from Montana called to tell us that Richard Browdigan had been discovered dead in his house in Bliesener, a place he hadn't lived in for years. It was shocking news. I loved Richard like a brother. I didn't remember the dream until we got the details the next day, that he put the revolver in his mouth and shot himself. The gun shot in the telephone box. What made it really sickening was that he'd done it some 6 weeks earlier. His body lying there on the floor, besieged by maggots. His neighbors hadn't checked in on him, apparently. Friends called and got his answering machine. As the weeks went by, I'm told, his voice message slowed down to a deep, crackly drawl as the batteries wore out. I'm going to end. I've got a lot of poems about friends who have died, and I think I'll just read this one. And this is actually another poem to my husband Ed, and it's called December the 10th, 2015. I should say that I reference a poem of his called Sketches from Edgewater, which is a very funny poem. and he used to go to something that was called Cub Foods. I don't know if people remember that. It's now Target on Sloan's Lake, and so at the checkout counter, there's this old guy who is teasing the checkout counter girl, Sheila, saying, "Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's, I think I've got it," and such things. And then pointing to a magazine on the stand there and pointing to a glamorous, famous Hollywood star and saying, "That's my wife, Alzheimer's, Alzheimer's." Anyway, so that's... At Sloan's Lake today, a goose swoops down over my head, honking its horn like a race car driver or a bomber pilot making an emergency landing. I think he's bearing a message from you on the anniversary of your death 16 years ago. I come home and turn on the radio, and there you are, reading poems on Joe's KGNU show. Your voice rings clear and strong until you get to the last recording, Sketches from Edgewater, where, like me now, you start to weep because you know you'll never be the old man teasing Sheila at the checkout counter of what used to be Cub's food and now is Target, where I go afterwards to shop for new sheets. I still sleep on my side of the bed, where you took your last breath and left through the skylight, even as I held you curled in my arms and let you go into that dark night. Sometimes it seems only yesterday, your sister breaking the silence. "I think he's gone," she said. Your side long empty, yet however soft the down pillows, freshly dressed duvet, new sheets, the spyglass in the roof above, brings a moon in on lonely nights, and you and my shadow haunt the banks of the shimmering lake I walk around now in the crack of the sun's last gleaming. Thank you.